I'm about to share a story that might make you rethink everything you assumed about love, professionalism, and the hidden sparks that can erupt in the most unexpected places. You might believe you've seen it all, but trust me, this one will surprise you. Stay with me until the very end, because the turn of events in this dentist's office will challenge your views on what's right, what's wrong, and how quickly an ordinary day can ignite a passion that refuses to stay secret. Ready? Let's begin. I'd been practicing dentistry for 18 years, and after so many thousands of checkups, I assumed nothing could catch me off guard. My days were as predictable as they come. Greet the patient, examine teeth, fill cavities, polish, wave goodbye. Then close the office, file paperwork, go home to the same dinner in the same apartment. A safe, comfortable life. Until the morning Noah walked in. He was a new patient, 20-something, confident, yet with an edge of shyness tucked behind his gaze. The moment I asked him to have a seat in the chair, something in the air changed. Maybe it was the way he tried to downplay his nerves with humor, or how his expression softened every time I spoke. Whatever it was, I felt a shift deep inside me. I'd grown so used to monotony that I forgot how it felt to be unexpectedly intrigued by someone. "Please, just call me Ethan," I told him, trying to ease the formality. "I'm a dentist, but I'm not the type to scare you with big needles and complicated jargon." Noah cracked a half-smile. "All right, Ethan. Be warned. I might clench my jaw or something. Dental visits aren't exactly my idea of fun." I laughed politely. "I hear that at least 5 times a day. Let's see if we can make this as painless as possible." As I snapped on my gloves, I felt an undercurrent of tension, like the hush in the air before a storm. But I couldn't place why. Perhaps it was the subtle magnetism of his eyes, or the ease with which he said my name. That day, a routine checkup felt anything but routine. The exam light shone across Noah's cheekbones, making his eyelashes cast tiny shadows on his skin. I told myself to focus on enamel, cavities, and gum health, but I kept noticing small details I never usually clocked, like the way Noah's lips parted as he exhaled, or the faint swirl in his brown hair near the temple. "Everything all right up there?" he joked, noticing I'd paused for a moment. "Absolutely," I answered quickly, forcing a smile behind my mask. "Just making sure I check each tooth thoroughly." He nodded, letting his eyes drift shut as I continued. That gave me an odd sense of relief, so he wouldn't see the flicker of confusion in my own eyes. Because that was what I felt, confusion. I'd never been so aware of a patient. But I dismissed it. By the time the appointment finished, I'd filed it away as a fluke. Another patient, another day. Yet, as he left, he turned with a brief wave, said, "Thank you, Ethan," and flashed a smile that was equal parts shy and playful. I found myself momentarily speechless. Then he was gone, and the hush returned to my office as if nothing had happened. I told myself I'd forget Noah, bury that fleeting tension under the weight of my daily routine. But not even 2 weeks later, the reception desk informed me I had a last-minute appointment, someone complaining about sensitivity in a rear molar. "Send them in," I told my assistant. Then in walked Noah. "Fancy seeing you again," I said lightly, controlling my reaction. "Tooth sensitivity, huh?" He shrugged, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, I felt something weird. Figured I should come in. Could be a false alarm." We both knew it might be an excuse, but neither of us said it out loud. He settled into the chair, and I resumed the role of dentist, prodding gently with the dental explorer, trying to pinpoint any real problem. It was mild, but likely not worth an urgent appointment. The tension thickened with each passing minute. While I explained some at-home care tips, he listened, nodding carefully. Yet there was something in his eyes, a curiosity, a spark. Was I imagining it? The moment I finished, he parted his lips like he wanted to speak, but then changed his mind. Finally, he said, "So, is there any reason I'd feel sensitive if there's no real problem?" My heart hammered. Was he talking about his tooth or something else? Stress can cause you to clench. That triggers sensitivity sometimes, I offered, keeping my voice professional. He seemed to weigh that explanation. Then he smirked, so subtly I almost missed it. Stress, right? Maybe I've got a lot on my mind. Try to relax, I said, half laughing, half something else. Relaxing often helps. And in that silent exchange, we both recognized an undercurrent we weren't naming yet. That day ended with me alone in the office, finishing up charts. Everyone else had gone home. The world outside was dark, city lights sparkling in the windows. As I locked up, footsteps approached down the hallway. The silhouette that appeared in the doorway made my heart lurch. "Noah, is something wrong with your tooth again?" I joked, trying to steady my nerves. He shook his head. I saw the lights on. Wanted to check if you were still here." 100 cautionary alarms went off in my mind. I was a professional, middle-aged, typically unflappable. This scenario felt like I was stepping into unfamiliar territory. "Come in," I said softly. He ventured in, scanning the room. The overhead light cast elongated shadows on the walls. My desk lamp glowed in a dim circle near the computer. He closed the door behind him, his expression shifting from curious to serious. "Look, I don't want to cross a line," he began, voice low, "but I couldn't shake this feeling. The way you look at me sometimes. I thought maybe," he trailed off, searching my face. I inhaled, carefully setting aside the chart. "Noah, it's not typical for me to." He took a step closer. "I know you have rules, ethical lines. But if I leave now pretending I don't notice this tension, I'm going to regret it." The air felt charged. My instincts said to push him out the door, remind him of boundaries. But the quiet voice inside me craved something else. "How about we don't talk about lines tonight?" I murmured, adrenaline pounding. "Just talk about what we both know is there." He swallowed, relief and excitement mixing in his eyes. "I'd like that." We ended up sitting on the small sofa in my office. Outside, the hallway lights flickered occasionally, but nobody else was there. My heart hammered so loudly I worried he'd hear it. "I never expected to feel like this," I admitted, leaning forward. "Not with a patient." Noah exhaled softly. "Trust me, it wasn't on my bingo card either, falling for my dentist." A half laugh escaped him, but it sounded strained with nerves. Our conversation meandered, from jokes about numb tongues to sharing bits of our personal histories. Then the conversation lulled, leaving us face to face, words unspoken but understood. Finally, I asked, "So, why'd you come here tonight?" His expression flickered with vulnerability. "Because I didn't want to keep lying to myself about the spark I feel whenever I'm near you." That was it. My caution collapsed under the weight of that honesty. I reached out, my palm brushing his jaw. Noah's eyes slipped shut at the contact. Then, as if drawn by an invisible magnet, we leaned in, lips meeting for the first time, softly, tentatively, but carrying a promise of something deeper. A quiet moan escaped him as the kiss deepened. My heart soared, mind spinning with the realization. This was real, and I wanted more. When we finally broke apart, the hush in my office seemed louder than any alarm. We stared at each other in breathless awe, words failing us. Then the magnitude of what we'd done settled in. I'd crossed a boundary I swore I never would. We shouldn't. I started, guilt gnawing at me. Noah's eyes flickered with disappointment. "Right? Your career, your reputation. I'm sorry, maybe I pushed too far." Yet a powerful part of me refused to let go. I gently squeezed his hand. "It's not about regret. It's about navigating this carefully. I don't want to risk hurting you or myself. But that doesn't mean I don't want it." The tension in his shoulders relaxed. He smiled in quiet relief, brushing his thumb over my wrist. So we figure it out? Let's figure it out, I echoed, feeling torn between caution and the euphoria of new possibilities. Sleep eluded me that night. I replayed our kiss, the warmth of his lips, the trembling in my stomach. Morning found me groggy but strangely buoyant. At the office, everyday tasks felt surreal. My assistant asked if I was feeling well. Apparently, I wore a dreamy expression. Midway through the day, I spotted a text from Noah on my phone. "Hey, you free later? I'd love to talk more." And my heart fluttered. This was insane. Yet I typed back, "Yes, come by after 6." When the time arrived, we drove separately to a quiet cafe near the outskirts of town. It was a place I often visited for solitude, never expecting to bring someone with me. Over coffee, we talked more about ourselves, likes, dislikes, random childhood anecdotes. It felt bizarrely normal, a budding romance, except for the overshadowing knowledge that we were crossing lines. He sat across from me, leaning forward, earnest eyes locked on mine. "You know," he said softly, "I'm not trying to jeopardize your career. If we decide it's too complicated, I'll respect that. But this, it feels worth the risk." My chest tightened. I couldn't recall the last time I felt so alive, as though the world had color again. "It does feel worth it," I conceded, voice hushed. "We just have to be discreet, for a while at least." He nodded, determination shining in his smile. "Then let's do it." So began our delicate dance, friendlier than standard dentist-patient interactions, but measured in the office. Outside of it, we explored a secret closeness that made my pulse race. We'd meet for late dinners, or slip away to quiet corners of the city. We discovered shared passions. He loved old black and white films. I loved 90s R&B. We teased each other constantly about our generational differences. He was early 30s, I was nearing 40. Yet the gap felt trivial when we were together. Still, guilt lurked in every shadow. I was well aware of the ethical ramifications. He was my patient, and I was breaching a professional code. Some nights, I lay awake thinking about the potential fallout. But every time, the memory of his laugh or the warmth in his eyes pushed the fear aside. In the clinic, we maintained a professional facade. If he needed any real procedure, I did my duty swiftly, controlling any flicker of personal feeling. Our staff remained oblivious, or so I prayed. But sometimes I'd catch my nurse squinting at me, as though suspecting I was happier than usual. One afternoon, Dr. Ross, a colleague, jokingly said, "You've been in a good mood lately. Some new flossing technique got you all excited." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, let's call it that." I prayed I wasn't too transparent. Our closeness deepened over a few months. We started discussing bigger life things, my decades in dentistry, his job in freelance writing, how we both ended up in this city. We learned each other's quirks, from my obsession with neat desks to his habit of wearing mismatched socks. The day I realized I was falling for him, wholeheartedly, was when I found a random note on my windshield. "You're the best reason to smile." And I carried it in my pocket all day, a small secret fueling my grin. But secrets have a way of unraveling. It happened one evening. I was strolling with him in a far part of town, away from my office or usual haunts. We were talking animatedly, arms occasionally brushing, when we ran into Dr. Collins from my practice. She froze, eyes flicking between us. "Ethan, didn't expect to see you here," she said, forced casualness in her voice. Before I could muster an excuse, Noah greeted her politely. She recognized him from the waiting room. Her eyes narrowed, just a fraction, but enough to make me sweat. She offered a polite goodbye and left, though I felt the question she hadn't asked burning in the air. I sighed, anxiety stinging me. This is how cracks start. If she suspects anything, it might spread. Noah's fingers slid into mine briefly. We'll handle it. It's not like we're doing anything wrong. Aside from the professional line, sure. But it's our private life, right? I nodded, though tension coiled in my gut. The last thing I wanted was trouble in the office. A week later, Dr. Collins cornered me after hours. "Ethan, I need to ask you something," she said softly. "Are you involved with that patient?" The tall brunette with the easy smile. My heart skipped. Lying straight to her face felt awful. But if I admitted it, she might be obligated to report me. So I tried deflection. "Collins, we're friends. He's new to the city. We've had coffee once or twice." She studied me, sorrow in her eyes. "Look, I'm not your enemy. But people talk. If it gets out that you're dating a patient, it could tarnish your record. The ethics board doesn't look kindly on such relationships, especially while he's still under your care." I mustered calm. "I understand. Thank you for the concern." When she left, I slumped into a chair, raking my fingers through my hair. The time had come to act. If we didn't do something, the rumor mill might catch hold. I texted Noah, "Need to talk. Urgent." Noah arrived at my apartment that evening. I paced, feeling the strain of an invisible countdown. When he walked in, I embraced him, then pulled back to see confusion in his eyes. "Hey, everything all right? You sound worried," he said, pressing a hand to my chest. I inhaled. "No. Dr. Collins basically gave me a heads up. People suspect. If this escalates, we risk trouble. I might lose my practice. You might get labeled as, well, an accomplice in something unethical." He flinched. "So what are we supposed to do?" A single tear of frustration threatened to form. "We have two choices: end our professional relationship or end our personal one. In other words, you either become someone else's patient or—" I couldn't finish. My heart ached at the thought of losing him. Noah exhaled, voice trembling with determination. "I'll find another dentist. That's no big deal, right?" Surprised relief washed over me. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I'm serious about us. If the only barrier is that I'm your patient, let's remove it. Doesn't mean it's easy, but I'm prepared to do it. Because He paused, eyes flicking downward, then meeting mine. "I don't want to lose you either." Emotion welled up, and I clasped his hand. "I appreciate that more than you know." So, Noah formally transferred to another dental clinic. I gave him a copy of his records, recommended a colleague in the next district. Let me tell you, it stung handing over my patient to someone else. But every time I felt that pang, I reminded myself it was to keep us safe and free. We tried to keep it discreet for a while longer, letting the rumor fade. Dr. Collins, a few weeks later, noticed that Noah no longer came to my clinic. She gave me a small nod of approval, as if to say, "You made the right move." I offered her a slight smile, grateful she wasn't prying further. Once that cloud lifted, we let ourselves exhale. The tension in the clinic receded. My staff resumed normal banter, and my nights with Noah became more openly joyous. No, we didn't advertise our relationship to the world, but at least we no longer had to hide behind an exam chair. Freed from the professional constraints, Noah and I explored each other's worlds. I discovered his love for puzzle hunts, and he indulged my fascination with classical music. On weekends, we'd venture out of town, hiking quiet trails or strolling through used bookstores. Each moment felt like a revelation. One evening, after a day trip to a seaside village, we found ourselves gazing at the ocean from a deserted pier. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and purples. He slipped his hand into mine, resting his head on my shoulder. "You know," he said softly, "I spent most of my life feeling overlooked. In family gatherings, in friendships, even in relationships. But with you, I feel truly seen." Warmth spread through my chest. "I'm not exactly the best at big romantic speeches," I admitted. but trust me when I say I see you. All of you. And I'd never want you to feel overlooked again. Under that sunset, with waves crashing softly, we shared a kiss that tasted of salt and promise. The world felt as if it had narrowed to just us two. But life rarely allows perfect tranquility for long. In the back of my mind, I'd always worried, what if the older rumors resurface? What if an ex-patient tries to pry into our connection? My anxiety flared whenever a familiar face from the office spotted us in public. I downplayed it to Noah, not wanting to burden him. Then, out of nowhere, I received a letter from the local dental board. My heart lurched. It requested a conversation regarding alleged unprofessional conduct, not specifying further. It might be completely unrelated, I told myself, but dread seeped in. Noah found me pacing the living room, letter crumpled in my fist. This might be about us, I whispered hoarsely. Or it might be something silly. I can't be sure. He squeezed my shoulder. Worst case, we deny it. Our relationship started after I switched dentists. We have no direct proof otherwise, right? I nodded, tension stiffening my body. You're right. We have to remain calm. If they question me, I'll handle it. I arrived at the board office with sweaty palms. A short meeting with a compliance officer. My mind whirred with 100 possible outcomes. Inside, a stern-faced official greeted me. Dr. Ethan, she said, scanning a file. We received an anonymous tip suggesting an inappropriate relationship with a former or current patient. We are obligated to ask, is there any truth to this claim? My heart pounded, but I kept composure. No, I said calmly. I maintained strict professional boundaries. The patient in question, Noah Mitchell, did see me, but transferred to another clinic months ago. Our personal relationship began after that point. If there's confusion, I'd be happy to clarify the timeline. She scrutinized me. An anonymous tip might be malicious or misguided. So you're certain there was no crossing of lines while he was under your direct care? Yes, absolutely certain. He's no longer my patient, and the nature of our relationship began only after he sought dental care elsewhere. I repeated. Her gaze flicked over me for any sign of falsehood. Eventually, she nodded, scribbled a note. We'll do a bit more follow-up, but if everything checks out, this case can be closed. Thank you for your cooperation. Walking out, I felt shaky relief. Perhaps we'd dodge a bullet. But who sent that tip? Possibly an old coworker or that colleague who saw us once. Or some random rumor. Either way, I prayed it ended here. Days later, the board letter arrived. Case closed, insufficient evidence to proceed. My chest flooded with relief. I showed Noah, who exhaled a triumphant, thank goodness. He kissed me in celebration, but the moment ended with me pulling back, tears in my eyes. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to hide. He cupped my cheek. Don't apologize. We've been playing this balancing act from the start. What matters is we're still standing. That night, we cooked dinner at my place. Pasta in a creamy sauce, with jazz playing softly. We toasted with cheap red wine, laughing at each other's silly stories. For once, I felt hope rather than fear. We decided, over time, to let some friends in on our secret. My close friend Dr. Collins was the first. Over coffee, I admitted everything, from the first spark to the hush-hush timeline. She listened intently, then shook her head in affectionate exasperation. You always were a stubborn romantic at heart, she teased. I won't pry further. I'm just glad you're happy. If you two want to come over for dinner sometime, let me know. My wife and I would love to meet him. Relief blossomed in me. That acceptance felt like a blessing. Soon, we introduced Noah to a small circle of trusted individuals, testing the waters. The negative backlash we dreaded never came. People seemed to interpret it as a love story that overcame timing or obstacles. We stayed mindful, because not everyone might be so understanding, but the darkness that once overshadowed us was lifting. Despite the improvements, life wasn't all sunshine. Sometimes, I'd catch a coworker giving me a funny look or a neighbor's double take if they saw me and Noah together. After all, we had a slight age gap, an unusual start. But we faced it as a team, forging an inside joke about suspicious side-eyes. Meanwhile, Noah thrived in his freelance writing. He even penned a short personal essay about risk-taking in life, reading a snippet to me one evening. Sometimes crossing a line is the only way to truly find what you've been missing. He shot me a knowing grin. My heart fluttered, recognizing the subtext of our journey. Months turned into a year, and what began as an illicit spark grew into a solid partnership. We found an equilibrium. I continued to practice dentistry with careful ethics, while Noah maintained his independence as a patient at another office. The fiasco with the dental board never resurfaced. Our anxieties subsided into a quiet caution, overshadowed by genuine affection. It was a mild autumn day when Noah and I spontaneously drove to a scenic overlook, leaves turning gold and crimson around us. We strolled along the ridge, the crisp wind nipping at our cheeks, the sky a watercolor of pale blues and pinks. As we paused to take in the view, he slipped an arm around me. "You think we'll ever look back on this and laugh at how terrified we were?" he asked softly. I laced my fingers with his. "Probably. Fear tends to melt away once you realize how strong you are together. Or maybe we'll just remember the adrenaline." We shared a private smile, a silent vow that no matter what storms might come, we'd walk through them hand in hand. Because yes, it had been messy, complicated, laced with near mistakes. But it had also awakened us to the fact that real love can appear in the unlikeliest corners, like the seat of a dentist's chair. Life pressed on with its usual rhythms. We had petty arguments about groceries, canceled plans when my schedule got intense, and discovered each other's flaws. Sometimes he teased me about hoarding too many dental floss samples. I poked fun at his addiction to triple espressos. Yet every morning, the sight of him dozing on my living room couch or rummaging in the fridge for orange juice filled me with warmth I never expected to find. One late evening, as we curled up on my sofa, starlight peeking through the curtains, we recalled how all this started. Just a casual appointment, then a second appointment, then that fateful after-hours moment when lines blurred under the clinic's fluorescent lights. We laughed, shaking our heads at our own recklessness. He pressed his forehead against mine. If not for that silly tooth sensitivity, maybe we'd never have had the nerve to talk. I smiled, heart full. I guess we owe our happily ever after to a phantom toothache. We dissolved into shared laughter, the kind that only a couple who's walked through fire can share. Understanding, relieved, soul deep. Our story might have begun in secrecy, teetering on the edge of impropriety, but we emerged stronger. We can't rewrite the rules we momentarily broke, nor can we pretend it never happened. It happened, and it led us here. And in each other's arms, we found a place free from the heaviness of regrets and fear, guided instead by acceptance and a vow to face whatever life hurls at us, together. Because in the end, love isn't always neat or properly scheduled. Sometimes, it shows up unexpectedly, sets your routine ablaze, and makes you choose between comfort and genuine connection. We chose connection, and I'd do it again every time. So, if you've stayed until this final line, you now know how a simple checkup changed two people forever. Maybe the world still whispers about how we met, how we crossed boundaries. But the bond we share speaks louder than any rumor. We walk forward, not with guilt, but with gratitude, because in one fleeting moment of unguarded warmth, we found the spark that lights up our lives. And that, I hope, reminds you, sometimes the unexpected is exactly what you need to discover who you really are, and who you can love with all your heart.